Beyond this and into infinity is man's last frontier.
Don't you forget about me.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Earth is a large, spheroid object, located in the spiral arm of the Milky Way. This fact is probably already known to you, as you are, most likely, standing, sitting, or if particularly energetic, lying on it at this very moment. It was formed in the year 4.5 billion BC from a cloud of dust and gas in the local area. The force that attracted this debris into the familiar sphere is known as gravity. The early Earth was an inhospitable environment. Temperatures were either scorchingly hot due to volcanic activity or freezingly cold due to a theory known as the snowball Earth. Unsurprisingly, this era is not regarded as a high point by most observers. The majority of beings you will encounter on a daily basis, from the cat to the wolf to the humble octopus, originated in this period. That is not to say, however, they lived on slopes of a volcano, or within an ice cube. That would be self-evidently ridiculous. Instead, we mean that their earliest ancestors came into existence during this era. These were unusual, simplistic creatures that most resembled the modern jellyfish. As time progressed, so did evolution. However, this stagnated when fish became the Earth, or as it was known at the time, the water's master race. They had no desire to change, and decided to stay the way they were and where they were forever. A good example of this can be seen in the coelacanth, which has not developed anything of note in the last 70 million years, instead whiling away its time playing an elaborate game of hide and seek. This was all to change, however, with the introduction of a new facet of life: the tides. The tides are daily water undulations caused by the gravitational push and pull of the main subject of this documentary, the moon. This title is in fact a misnomer, as it has recently been discovered that there is more than a single moon. Two have been sighted in the orbit of the planet Mars, and if some observers are to be believed, this is only the beginning, more having been rumoured to exist around Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and even renegade planetoid Pluto. Although this last is increasingly unlikely, especially after the revelation this moon's name is, apparently, Charon. The moon is formed in a similar fashion to our own home. Galactic matter condensed into an orb. This orb swirled through the cosmos until it was captured by the Earth's gravitational pull. Since that point, they have been inseparable, in spite of the lack of attempts. This moment, and the creation of tidal patterns, was a major turning point, as the movement of the sea currents forced the fish to give up their carefree lifestyle. Some had enough of the lunar interference with their aquatic home and packed their bags, heading for the mainland. Those taking part in the exodus of the seas settled amicably in their new home. Some became burrowing creatures, such as earthworms, hiding from the moon in the dark ground. Others grew wings in order to investigate the skies, attempting reconnaissance of their new nocturnal observer. This disparity of response may explain the long-term animosity between the two animal groups, which can currently be observed in the early morning gang violence between their members. The adventurous and outward-thinking flyer will always have the better of those who hide their head in the dirt. most successful group of land dwellers, however, was the inaccurately named terrible lizards. These dinosaurs were gigantic reptiles which lived in similar conditions to our own, grazing and hunting in the fashion of cows or tigers. Those reincarnated from the early burrowers, known colloquially as archaeologists, are fascinated by the discovery of the bones of these creatures. Why their bones, however? Where are the dinosaurs now if they were so successful? Why is it unlikely to spot one in the local public house? Unfortunately, their conquest of the world was cut short by the unexpected arrival of another large orb from the outer regions of space. An asteroid. This asteroid was larger than any dinosaurs and crushed them, throwing ashes into the sky in a memento mori of such great proportions the other giant lizards were unable to continue their lives. This event was the greatest disaster since the complete loss of our archives in the tumultuous office reorganizing of 1997. The archives have since been replaced by the folk history of our resident Egyptologist and pest control officer, and the race memory of a local Cocker Spaniel. Despite the horror of the extinction level event, however, it was not a wholly negative experience. A small rodent viewed the falling rock and gained an epiphany. Perhaps if such a being as an asteroid could visit the Earth, then the rodent could visit the other object in the sky, the one that never grew close enough to touch. The moon. Rodent was unable to live its dream, being a miniature, four-legged mammal, smaller than the average dog. However, using the faculty of race memory, it insisted its ancestors succeeded where it could not. These ancestors were as follows: mouse, rat, cat, Cocker Spaniel, sloth, lemur, orangutan, chimpanzee, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens sapiens. The last of these is the species to which our intended viewer is a member, the human. The early human lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. This was not conducive to the industrial project of building a space travel device. They had, however, not forgotten their promise to the early rodent. As we can see, many cave paintings featured their interplanetary goal. The most complex of these can be seen in North, County Meath, Ireland. This appears to be a detailed diagram of the moon's surface, with specific points marked as landing sites. All that remained was to build a rocket. The human species organized itself into a nation with a large workforce in order to complete this task. The rocket began to be built. Following the theories of aerodynamics, a shape was chosen: the pyramid. The evidence of these plans has misled many modern scholars. They believed that aliens visited the Earth, citing the evidence of space travel. This is incorrect, as it was the Egyptians' own technology. Humanity did not require the interference of a higher power to be innovative and creative, unless, of course, we count the muse, that is the moon itself. We must not, however, give too much credit to these early pioneers, as they made a single, crucial mistake. While the pyramids were structurally sound and aerodynamic, their inventors forgot to include one thing: a means of propulsion. The incomplete diagrams were then handed over by Chief Technician Cleopatra to Mark Anthony. It was believed that the Romans, with their knowledge of hydropower, would be able to use their great industrial and intellectual abilities to create an engine. This was not the case. Rather than doing so, the Romans were distracted. These distractions came in three forms. 1. Colonialism. 2. Overcomplicated entertainment. 3. Intercourse. Luckily, help was at hand. A young scientist, Mr. Christ, attempted to convince the Romans the error of their ways. He explained that living a good life and concentrating on your work were the only ways to reach the next world. Contemporaneously, however, this message was not well received.
At this juncture, we must note the alternative history of the world, one in which Mr. Christ, known to his associates as Jesus, was not a well-regarded physicist, but instead the child of a deity. The other history recounts the world as follows.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Discrepancy can, however, be accounted for by the loss of our archival material. One of these histories is accurate, however we are unable to discern between option A, which has large amounts of evidence only highlighting the negligence of our staff for losing a high percentage of it, or option B, which is a single, large, contradictory book which allows them to sleep better at night. 59.5% of our staff chose the latter.
In either case, during the execution of Mr. Christ, an unusual and serendipitous event occurred. The moon covered the sun. Many took this as a judgment for not heeding Christ's advice. Thus began the period known as AD, or Ascending Doctrine. This event heralded a new interest in the moon. The first piece of scientific romance, later science fiction, was produced only 200 years later. This tale, known as A True History, by Greek genre author Lucian, told of a crew of sailors who were borne aloft by a great storm, finally landing on the moon. When they arrived, they became involved in the political machinations of its godly inhabitants. But while this is patently false, the imagination of space travel had returned. Unfortunately, however, so had the great greed of the Roman Empire. Rather than legions and emperors, knights and kings became the new rulers of the world, fascinated by similar distractions. 1. Power. 2. Authority. 3. Corruption. Some battled against these regimes. These individuals were not always successful.
On second thoughts, let's not go to Camelot.
In Holland, the inventor and peeping Tom, Hans Lippershey, created a set of lenses that allowed him to peer into his neighbors' bathrooms without their knowledge. Italian Galileo Galilei heard of this idea, and after a number of pleasant, if morally dubious afternoons, decided to use the telescope to look up at the stars. He looked closer at the moon than ever before, and was about to announce a great plan for travel, before being quickly silenced by the Catholic Church. For them, it would not do for a man to travel to the heavens, in case they did not find God there, or even worse, if they did, and he did not approve of the debauched and corrupt contemporary church. Around this period, a painter named Leonardo da Vinci was also interested in similar ideas. After painting a number of religious scenes, Mr. da Vinci decoded the secret meaning behind his favorite subject's lessons. Christ's ascension was a metaphor for space travel. Upon this discovery, Mr. da Vinci did a detailed survey of the moon's surface. He then made plans for a flying machine, one which would travel to this promised land. Again, however, when constructing his machine, he was followed by the powerful. The Borgias, who had hired da Vinci as a military architect and to paint their alopecia-suffering niece, misconstrued his interplanetary travel as an escape attempt from his legally binding contract. Some scholars have concluded this was actually a lucky escape for Mr. da Vinci, as he had no plans for an oxygen supply, and the most famous painter of all time would have embarrassingly died of self-induced asphyxiation. Others claim this would only have brightened his style with the debauched Borgias, as long as he'd been enjoying himself at the time.
The technologies and discoveries of the time were exciting for all, but a newly discovered document reveals the less scrupulous side of the urge for exploration.
Calling all aristocrats, all empires, all colonizers. You're aware of the new advances in technology of flight and optics? We here at the Royal Moon Company have an idea for you. These wonderful technologies can be put to use to make us all a lot of money. Sir John Herschel, working from the texts of Reverend Thomas Dick, has announced that there's a lot more going on in the skies than just angels against the God-given right and power of the British, French, American, German, Dutch, Belgian Empire? I think not. So fund us, and we'll get the British, French, American, German, Dutch, Belgian flag in the moon and start spreading your civilized ways alongside a tidy profit.
There was only one problem with this exciting opportunity for money-making, except for the ethical implications, which hadn't bothered the exploiters about the Earth's own people, so why should they be bothered about moon people? This problem was that none of this was true. As all wise and well-meaning individuals know, the moon is comprised of a lactose fromage-based alloy, making the diet of any potential inhabitants far too unhealthy to survive, let alone be light enough to fly. Why this substance is so pervasive is unknown, but some have speculated a link to unconfirmed tales of a subhuman mammal making an early attempt at an orbit of the satellite. This story may be the invention of a spurned lover of a proclaimed dish running away with a piece of cutlery. All that was clear is that without the possibility of free Vespertilio homo labor, that the rich and powerful of the Earth would soon start to exploit their people too much. A conflict was inevitable.
We are left in the early modern era with a powerful royalty and aristocracy holding down ordinary people from their destiny. Tensions were rising, and on Monday, 26th of March, 1840, the first shot was fired. This image is the first ever photograph of the moon. It reignited the human desire for travel. However, before it was even developed, it had already set events in motion. Down the street, from the cameraman, one John Napoleon Draper, a large mass of protesters were hoping for bread, as their teeth had been rotted from a strict diet of gâteau. These protesters were being loomed over by a heavily armed force of French infantry. The explosive charge of the flash was mistaken for the firing of a rifle. The revolution began apace. Soon the royalty had been deposed, and Mr. Draper, mistakenly referred to as Mr. Bonaparte after his call of "I was almost blown apart," had been appropriated as the hero of the people. This rising movement swept across the world. "We do not need to be held down. Would you rather live on your knees or ascend to the heavens?" was the slogan. America and Russia took the message on board the most, removing all their aristocrats and royalty in people's revolutions. This newfound freedom led to the formation of the Troika, the three superpowers of the Earth, and the beginning of their space race. Like the Earth and the Moon, good things come only in pairs, and 3 is notable only for its being a crowd. One of the superpowers must therefore drop out. This happened at an early stage. All 3 had poor first attempts. The Wright brothers of America made it only 8 meters off the ground, a staggering 38,439,992 meters less than they had planned. Russia's first flight, disputably performed by Alexander Mozhaysky, reached a similar conclusion. France first attempted to build a literal Tower of Babel to the orbiting orb. However, this only made it to a height of 324 meters. A brave pioneer named Franz Reichelt decided this would be a suitable launchpad from which to begin France's first flying machine. This was a collection of wood and canvas fashioned into the structure of a bird's wing. The great launch day arrived, with all the world's eyes upon Reichelt. His trip was somewhat unsuccessful. This has led to the tower being embarrassingly nicknamed I Fell. After this point, the French were humiliated and vowed revenge, claiming they would arrive on the moon first. They researched ancient spacecraft and wrote textbooks about moon travel, mocking the British for their reliance on fictional elements in their research. Then, in 1903, they released the cinematic proof that they had achieved their goal, their trip to the moon. America and Russia were shocked. France had won. The human dream was complete. Or was it? Local amateur video enthusiast Stanley Carell noted a number of factual inaccuracies in the documentary footage, such as the stars appearing to have faces, the moon being inhabited, and the inaccurate portrayal of the moon's surface. This brought up doubt to its veracity. The final proof was, however, when Georges Méliès, renowned French filmmaker, included a jumper with the very rocket from the trip to the moon on it in his latest fictional film. After this revelation, the French were too humiliated to continue with their research. The other superpowers, America and Russia, pressed on unabated. First came flight, then rocketry, then nuclear power and advanced fuels. Plans were made up for different options for travel. Research was completed. And then finally, we were free. First, an empty rocket to space. Then, a transmitting orb, mankind's first artificial moon. Then a dog. A monkey. Another monkey. Space had been conquered. But what of the moon? Russia sent a Luna 2 probe onto the surface. Luna 3 then took pictures of the dark side. We had prepared. We were ready. On July 20th, 1969, man first stepped onto the moon.
I'm going to step off the land now. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But were we still distracted? Were we there out of a deep calling, or just looking for a new territory to control? What next? Why do we not return? Why do we not go further? Are we trapped to only dream of the future, like the French? Have we again become controlled by the corrupt? Is it time for the people to free themselves and ascend further? To the stars.